Okay. Today's class. Oh, Wepwawet.
Wepwawet.
Today's class is going to be on the subject of our transitions as basically people, men in particular, from the school system to the prison system. And I want to do this because I remember the brother Jai, the one I partnered with on Soul Movement Radio, he had the idea of doing this, just talking about the prison system and everything that goes on inside of it. But I wanted to include the educational system and how we're pretty much being trained for prison from school.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't understand that, So I wanted to get to the definition or just go to the beginning of exactly where this movement stems from. A lot of people don't know this starts from the eugenics movement. And I'll be reading in part from a website called autoblocks2000.com. And they basically give you the beginning of the IQ test or the intelligence quotient. And that shows you exactly the reason for the IQ test, why they even created it. Because remember, the eugenics movement started in Nazis' camp during World War I, during Nazis' camp. And they did that because they wanted to classify human beings based on race. It was a disguise because mentally what they tried to say was, okay, certain human beings are inferior to the Anglo-Saxons, such as blacks, Asians, Jews, mainly blacks and Jews. And what they wanted to do was create a test to show this. And I'm going to read in part as starts. The question is, what does the IQ test measure? Intelligence testing began in earnest in France when in 1904 psychologist Alfred Binet was commissioned by the French government to find a method to differentiate between children who was intellectually normal and those who were inferior. The purpose was to put the latter into special schools where they would receive more information. In this way, the disruption they caused in the education of intellectually normal children could be avoided. This led to the development of the Binet scale, also known as the Simon-Binet scale, a recognition of Theophile Simon's assistance in its development. It constituted a revolutionary approach to the assessment of individual mental ability. However, Binet himself cautioned against misuse of the scale or misunderstanding of its implications. According to Binet, the scale was designed with a single purpose in mind. It was to serve as a guide to identify children in the schools who required special education. Its intention was not to be used as a general device for ranking all pupils according to a mental worth. Binet also noted that the scale, properly speaking, does not permit the measure of intelligence because intellectual qualities are not superposable, and Binet intelligence cannot be described as a single score. The use of the intelligence quotient, IQ, as a definite statement of a child's intellectual capability would be a serious mistake. In addition, Binet feared that IQ measurement would be used to condemn a child to a permanent condition of stupidity, thereby negatively affecting his or her education and livelihood. If you go further down in time, you have a man named William H. Goddard who actually picked up the IQ test. It's actually going to go further into this. H. Goddard, director of research at Vinland Training School in New Jersey, translated Binet's work into English and advocated a more general application of the Simon-Binet scale. Unlike Binet, Goddard considered intelligence a solitary, fixed, and inborn entity that could be measured. While Goddard extolled the value and use of the single IQ score, Louis M. Terman, who also believed that intelligence was heredity and fixed, worked on revising the Saint-Binet scale. His final product, published in 1912 as the Stanford revision of the Binet-Simon scale of intelligence, also known as the Stanford-Binet, became the standard intelligence test in the United States for the next several decades. Once American educators had been convinced of the need for universal intelligence testing and the efficiency it could contribute to school programming within a few years. Few people realize that the test being used today, of which the IQ test continues to be the most popular, represent the end result of a historical process that has its origins in racial and cultural bigotry. Many of the founding fathers of the modern testing industry, including Goddard, Herman, and Carl Brigham, the developer of the Scholastic Aptitude Test, advocated eugenics. Eugenics is a movement concerned with the selective breeding of human beings. Selected human beings would be mated with each other in an attempt to obtain certain traits in their offspring, much of the same way that animal breeders work with champion stock. The eventual goal of eugenics is to create a better human race. The Nazis took this idea to the extreme. All inferior humans, especially Jews, retarded children or adults, and any individual with genetic defects were to be destroyed. And so many ill and retarded people and many Jews were killed during World War II. The founding fathers of the testing industry saw testing as one way of achieving the eugenics aim. Goddard believed that innateness and inability of intelligence levels, for example, was so firm that he argued for the reconstruction of society along the lines dictated by IQ scores. So what they used to do, and this is me talking, what they did was they created a system, and this is, again, from the Nazi German camp, to basically socialize human beings based on intelligence. But the problem is with that is they had too many whites that tested negative as well. That was the problem. When you go further down the line in history from the 40s, 50s, 60s, that was their whole thing, was that racial inferiority, and that was supposed to keep pushing the myth of white supremacy of the human beast on us. You know, because you have to realize most people who fail these outcome-based, or not outcome-based, but IQ testing, or don't do good with the IQ testing, intelligence quotient, is us. And they basically, what they do is they train us from a certain point in time, from the beginning of you going into pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, on down, junior high to high school. So they train you mentally, so that when you finally do take a test, a statewide test, the test for colleges, I forgot the name of the test, but how good you grade or how high your score is will determine if you can get into either Harvard or the worst colleges. But when you're going into eugenics, you have to realize, again, this is something that a lot of our people don't even know about what eugenics is, and a lot of us never heard of eugenics. And when you're dealing with us and how we're being tested, the first thing is this is still a worldwide thing that they're keeping us from achieving a certain amount of intelligence. Also, when you go and you look deeper into eugenics, you realize what they were trying to do was they were trying to say, based on, especially black women have the smallest heads based on human beings. So they would try to say that because they have the smallest heads and smallest skulls, that they would be the least intelligent. Okay. Right. And also with black men's heads are actually, if you look, African men's are actually smaller than white men's heads. So they were trying to show, based on head size, that, okay, this is a way to show that, okay, if your head is small, your brain is smaller. Right. But if you're testing us based on a worldwide scale, not just a United States level, you're realizing that Africans, because we're still Africans. We're not just, as we like to say, African Americans are just we're still connected to that. If you're basing it on Africans all over this world, or just Africans coming from Africa, they have the highest scores of anybody.
Right.
Outside of Asians, outside of people from China and Japan, Vietnam and all over, we have the highest scores. When they come over here and they go to school, they ace everything because they're not being educated within the European paradigm. Okay? And to fast forward through time, you have something that was created called the outcome-based education. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of outcome-based education, but outcome-based education was created as a way to, as they try to say, if you look it up, they try to say, well, this was something that was created so that we won't mess with the self-esteem of those that were in, inner city schools, those that weren't doing very well on tests, and those that wasn't learning the information. Because normal learning, how you were measuring it is, for example, if I say 2 plus 2, if I give you a problem and I say 2 plus 2 is what? 4. Instead of you saying 4, you say 5.
Right.
Right. Instead of you saying what it's supposed to be, you say 5, you get it wrong, and I say, no, that was wrong. I want you to do that again, and I'm going to show you how you were wrong. Instead of doing that, which is what most of the better schools still do, what they did was they took the outcome-based learning or outcome-based education and they applied that to the public schools that most of us are in. So meaning that the example of outcome-based education, you do the same thing. You say 2 plus 2 is 4. And if you said 5, instead of you saying it was wrong, the response is from the teacher is or the person helping you is, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's all right, you did your best. It wasn't based on learning. It's all based on, do you follow instructions correctly? Right. Do you understand how to get this? Not did you get it, but do you understand the way to getting it? So you don't really actually learn the information. It's the same thing with reading, because this is going into, and I'm not going to read from this website, but it was a website based on outcome-based learning. And with reading, a word such as ignominious, which is defined as being lightly embarrassed. I never learned that word in school.
Right.
Certain words, they teach you certain words, meaning that, for example, they make sure in certain classes, such as those that are the resource classes, developmental classes, they make sure most of those kids don't read out loud, okay? And when you don't read out loud, let's say if you don't skip yourself, if you don't mess up the word, because a lot of us are afraid when we're in school, we're afraid to read because we're afraid to get something wrong. Because if you get something wrong, you feel bad about it. So the way they curve that is by not allowing you to read out loud. See, when I went to school, I was in developmental classes. They labeled me as retarded. They labeled me as mentally disabled, emotionally disturbed. And so rather than me learning the information, it was basically, do your best, we'll pass you. It's not about achieving the best grade. It's not about, well, look, you should be thinking about getting out of high school and getting to the best college or getting to Rice or Baylor to become an engineer. Like, no, you're going to get as much done as possible so that you can get out of this high school. So it's not about actually achieving a certain form of status or a certain form of education so that you can actually, in the back of your mind, learn this information. It's all based on, okay, did you follow instructions correctly? Most of us are in that type of program.
Right.
So because our learning, the African way of thinking, the Nuwapian way of thinking, supersedes what the Europeans' paradigm is when you're trying to teach a child, because we accelerate faster on a learning scale than any other race of people on this planet, and they know this. So the best way for them to also make their grade when it comes to their budget is they find ways to grade on curves, and they don't allow the specific person to actually achieve a certain form of education. So a lot of us have a problem. They diagnose me, and this is personal experience. I'm giving you personal experience of my own educational experience in the European paradigm. They diagnose me as reading on a 4th grade reading level. By the time I was in the 11th grade, I was on a 4th grade reading level. So when you leave high school, you have to realize colleges look at this. Colleges look at this, and jobs look at this. They don't tell you this when you're in high school. They're not really training us to go out there and achieve the best success, or what they say is the American dream. They are training us to be able to have some form of self-esteem and to be able to follow instruction, which is mostly left brain activity. So most of us are left brain individuals based upon these systems. So when you also put in what's called the learning disability, most of us are deemed with a learning disability and low IQs. Mm-hmm. So mentally, you carry that thought pattern to everything you do in life and also in the job system. So most of us may or may not have ever went into college, because most of us were taught you'll never make it to college, you're not smart enough, or not to be as overt with it. It's a subconscious thing. It's, if you remember in the Malcolm X movie, when he was he was sitting in class, and the caveman was telling him, why don't you just learn how to be a carpenter? And he's Malcolm X want to be a lawyer, and he's like, no, that's not for, you're a nigger. That's not for niggers. So that still goes on today, and it's been going on for the past 30 years, especially on black men. I hate to exclude the sisters, but this is on black men, because what's happening is most of us, the challenge that's needed for us, it's not being met. And so a lot of us are becoming dropouts. They're not taking their time to learn. Most of the black teachers, they're being taught how to teach on a European, way of thinking, so they're not even helping us either. So when we're in school, the problem is most of us are dropouts. They'll put the statistic down that most of the dropouts are of a certain racial ethnicity, meaning blacks, meaning Africans. And because we're the ones, they'll put that statistic down, but they don't explain to people why we're that way, why we're dropping out, because we're not getting the challenge met to us. You understand what I'm saying? So because because the challenge isn't being met, we're leaving school. We're like, to hell with this, I need to find my own way. And so most of us are dropping out and going to the streets to find our way. And so when you go to that low level, you have a problem. That's where most of the gangs were created, because of going into lower level situations. You have situations where a lot of the people that were from the Black Panther movement started the Crips. That's something that's documented. But when you have what's called the thug culture, which is a better way of saying it, the thug culture is created out of these situations that's going on in our homes, or black or African men leaving the homes and going to the lower level situations to try to provide, because most of these jobs are not hiring us, because in their mind we can't do the job anyway because we're not intelligent enough. Right. Okay. When you're dealing with what's called and I need to go into this subject, the learning disability. Learning disability is also a part of that same movement of the eugenics. Then they don't want to admit to this. They'll say, well, it was thrown out at a certain point, it was rejected, and the person who started it was from Hitler's camp, he was rejected too, but the Binet scale continues. So they're still using the likeness of the Binet scale to measure how smart we are as Africans. So the eugenics movement still goes on to this day. And what happens is, fast forwarding again, when we're in the streets, we are committing the most crime because you're not allowing a man to provide for his family, and you're having a man that you have diagnosed as being either mentally disabled or mentally retarded or emotionally disturbed, because in his mind, I'm nothing anyway. I'll never be anything. They told me I'm nothing, so I'll never be anything, so I might as well do whatever I have to do to achieve something for my family. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of them don't teach, even when we're in school, good diction. They teach that good diction is talking white. They teach that if you read, you're trying to be white. You're not being black enough. If you're intelligent, think about it. I'll give you an example. And this is coming from the movie 500 Years Later. If you remember Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you had two black men that at some point they keyed on. You had Will Smith and Carlton. Right. Will Smith was street smart, but book dumb, whereas Carlton was book smart and street dumb. Who was the star of the show?
Mm-hmm.
Will Smith. Will Smith, exactly. Why would they do that? Why did you have to put the person who was book dumb, street smart, as the person that you would key on as being the star of the show? Because they could have put Will Smith as the Carlton role, but put him a little more pizzazz to it, and they could have put Carlton as the street dumb, because Carlton, prior to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that role, he played as what? The tap dance kid. He came out of Silver Spoons as the miniature Michael Jackson. He didn't play an intelligent role prior to that show. But in that show, they make sure that what's being projected to our minds is street smart is better than book smart. So they find ways. It's even not just in that sense. When the thug culture is created in the early 90s, even in music, we followed the thug culture with gangster rap, all this and all of that. It was no longer conscious. If you remember the early 90s, from 90 to 94, from between 92 and 94, it began to wane away from intelligent rap, from Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, the Rakims, right, Public Enemy, the Rakims, the Big Daddy Kanes, Intelligent Hoodlum, all of these different, KRS-One, etc. Brand Nubian, exactly. They were leaving a certain conscious movement, and because you have to realize, once they realized this music was making money, they began to take control of it, and because they had the monopoly over what we listen to, then that became what they pushed. And so you have people that, we have African males that already are rejected by society and are rejected by the school system and are rejected by their jobs. And then you have a culture coming out that's teaching them, it's okay to be lower level. It's okay to go out and kill your own. It's okay, because there's a difference. It's the one thing I wanted to really emphasize about talking about hip-hop right now. There's a difference between playing the part of a situation where, police brutality is going on and explaining what's going on in the streets, whereas NWA actually explained what was going on. They were playing a part. They were pushing a situation where, look, a lot of these artists are not telling you the truth of what's going on, so we're going to at least play the part And we're going to show you, look, this is how we feel. You're not allowing us to get education. You're not allowing us to feed our families. So this is what's going on, and the police are destroying us in this system. That's the difference between a person such as 50 Cent, who is just degenerate and who teaches and pushes out degenerate behavior amongst our people, and as well as Rick Ross. These type of individuals that are teaching us that it's okay to have a ghetto dream, as opposed to reaching for a higher goal to be teachers and lawyers and situations of intelligence in our situation. So we're constantly being spread apart from what's known as being intelligent or out-intelligent in our system or an African system of thinking. So we're constantly being spread apart. And because we're out there in the street, you're having a situation that's pushing us in prisons more and more. The prison system now, the population in the prison system for African Americans is the majority over us being in society. We're the majority of the prison system. We're 65 to 70% of it, counting Latinos as well. The majority of us are in there or dead. And because we're in that situation, a lot of things are being done to our families. Not just a lot of things. Specifically, there being less families being, less kids being born. There are less of us coming together. You're having more AIDS being generated from this prison system. You're having more crime. You're having more death. And because you're having more crime and you're having more death, you're having less of us, and you're having what's called a form of mass genocide amongst our people.
That's going to be right back.
No problem. And that is a problem that's going on right now. And because we don't see the bigger picture, we're victims of it. And they're seeing us as a necessary thing or group or a race to be destroyed. And this is something that was created by them. We didn't create this system that we're in. Mentally, we're being looked upon as black males as reality as headed for extinction, whether it be through AIDS, homosexuality, prison system, not being able to get a job. Depression starts to mound onto us. Suicide is starting to mound. We're getting an all-time high in suicide in our culture. A lot of us are not getting the proper training that we need. So a lot of us are carrying that self-esteem into our livelihoods. And then it carries over into your family. In your mind, I can't provide, I'm not smart enough. So because I'm not smart enough, I can't do it anyway. And because I can't do it anyway, then why even try? So your intelligence level and your self-esteem is now carrying over to your life for the rest of your life until you're dead. Or if you go out there, for example, the biggest thing now that they're, not even now, at one point in the 80s was they were trying to have a study as of whether we have a gene inside of us as black men that dispose us to violence in our community. So they were trying to figure out why there's so much violence in our situations. Why is there so much violence in the black culture? But they never put in the necessary reasons for it, such as not allowing us to get the jobs we need because of lack of education. So when you have a lack of education, the budget gets cut, so you don't get taught properly. They don't put that in there. They don't put the reason for why there's so much crime going on, because think about it. If you have less jobs, you have more crime. If you're in the hood, in the ghetto, and a person does not have a job or a means to make money or provide for his family, he's going to find another alternative fashion to do it. So, of course, the rise in the crime rate is going to go up. They don't put that in. They don't put that in their study. They just say, well, this is the situation that's going on right now. You follow? Our brother Umar Johnson talks about this a lot in what he does. He's in the education system, and he does his best as a Pan-Africanist to help out our young males. And I have to talk about this because we have to realize why we are at the situation that we're at in his system. Mentally, because you don't know the game, it turns from being a game to a war. And there's already been a war. They found the way to racially classify us as retarded and stupid, and it carries over to us not being able to do what we're supposed to do as African males, and we're constantly trying to fit a square and a circle inside of a triangular peg consistently. Every time you turn around, it's the same situation, and they never put the real reason. They never give you the history. They'll never teach you this in school, the history of the intelligence quotient and the eugenics movement. You have to do your own research and realize this is a war being done to take away the masculine principle out of the African male, and not just in the African male within yourself, but take away the masculine principle out of the African home that is constantly trying to survive or be in survival mode inside of the European paradigm in America. That is our problem. That is one of our main problems. That is a form of mass genocide. Any questions?
Also, the music, the hip-hop culture needs to be aware of what they're doing, but a lot of times the record companies do put out miseducation of what's going on. And Professor Griff made mention of the fact of the dressing, how men are going to be wearing skirts now and changing into more homosexual dressing. And a lot of our young men don't understand what it means about the pants sagging. There's a prison code that you take it up the rear. But a lot of our young men think it's a style or fashion. So we need to go back to educating our young men, and we need to go back to educating ourselves as a people and bring back right knowledge and bring back knowledge of self. Because a lot of us don't have knowledge of self at all. And we as men have to be teachers of our women, because now you see why they don't trust us anymore. Because we're not being teachers, we're not being protectors and providers for our women and for our children, for ourselves. So we need to educate, like, they say we need to have our own schools to teach our own children, because that's where a lot of kids be dropping out. And if we had our own schools, we'd be dropping into school, because they'd be learning something that they know that can be productive to them and that's of them and the essence of them. So,
no, that's true, Brother Tower Hat, for saying that. We need to know that this is a war. We need to know this is a war, and we need to have strategies on how to combat this situation. And that one of the main strategies is coming together as a race, as an African race, and realizing that those in financial situations that better our race, we do need our own schools. We do need our own language in our schools, and we do need to be taught from an African way of teaching, as opposed to this outcome-based crap that's keeping us mentally dumb, okay, and keeping us stupid. The hip-hop culture now is a dumbed-down culture. That's the reality. It's never going to go back to the golden era where if you wasn't intelligent, you wasn't going to last. And I remember talking to somebody about this. I said, this is just my opinion, but if Lil Wayne came out 20 years ago, he would have waned. He would have dissipated, because you had to have some form of education going on. Otherwise, you weren't going to survive. You had to have some form of culture about yourself. Because that puts you in a category of people will respect you in the hip hop community. You couldn't, it was like a rites of passage. But because we're following the more aggressive way of thinking, the more, not so much aggressive, not manly, but it's feminized now. It's all based on dumbness and trying to get a certain amount of physical wealth and cosmetic looking situations. I mean, if you look at BET Hip Hop Awards, everything is based on looking a certain part. but it's not based on intelligence at all. Those that are based on intelligence, the Hip Hop Awards, they gave a somewhat of a Lifetime Achievement Award to Rakim, but that was long overdue. And just think about it. Think about 10 to 15 years from now, who would they be giving that award to? Soulja Boy? Drake? Lil Wayne? 2 Chainz? Think about that for a second. Think about where we're going now in terms of a culture, in terms of an intelligence situation. The intelligence of our minds is not being pushed. And so when you're looking at TV now, we have very few black shows. And the black shows that we do have, we just got the Ricky Smiley show that just came on TV One. You have the Such the Entertainer show that just came on, where these are still coon humor. They try to have these little lessons being learned within it, but the people who are talking on these shows, the black people, the African males and females, are not talking with any form of intelligence. And the kids are on the show are acting real shiftless. So they're not really getting a projection of intelligence. You're still getting the same shiftless, jiving Negro that you've been getting for years. Mm-hmm. That's still a problem, because that's being pushed upon our culture. We have very few prominent roles. I said before, Omar Epps is the only prominent role I can think of on TV on House, as a doctor. Other than that, there's no multiple choice for us, so our men are not seeing a situation where, man, I can be that. There's no training in our minds. I can't, if I have a child now, I can't point to him on TV, you need to be more like that. I have to be my own example. It was a point where you could put a child in front of a TV and walk away for a little while and come back an hour later, at least he saw something of progression. Whether it be, the Cosby Show, or whether you're looking at it from an honest standpoint with Good Times, where they may be in a financial bind, but they came together as a family and got out of it. Whereas now, you don't see that anymore. If you're looking at shows like Love and Hip Hop, you're seeing a man that, Stevie J, who can't even take care of his relationships correctly, and he's the idiot of the show. Mm-hmm. So they're pushing these situations onto us, onto our culture every single day that we watch TV. And as I said before, anytime, and this is coming from Dr. Francis Welsing, anytime you turn on the TV, whether morning, noon, and night, at Tom and Amon, you are getting a dose of white supremacy and the grid that comes along with it. That's our problem, because we don't have anything for ourselves. The men of our culture don't have anything to lean on for some form of intelligence. When you go in the ghettos, in our hoods, to talk to them and say, look, man, you can be more than this. They don't want to listen to what you have to say. Their thing is, look, I'm selling these drugs because this is all I have. And you have to teach them, we have to teach them, look, there's more to this there's more to life than what you're doing. They don't see it like that. They've been taught this is all they know how to do, is sell drugs and rape and kill out and kill and rob people. They've been taught systematically this is what we are, because you have what's called racial projection in the media. When you project a certain group of people to be a certain thing, those races will see themselves as that. There was a study that came out very recently that says that the self-esteem of Africans, they say blacks, but I say Africans, is at an all-time low because of what they watch on TV. And the whites is at an all-time high because of what they watch on TV. And everyone knows that, as my father, Dr. Malachi Z.York, said, you have what's called multiple choice amongst other races of people, or amongst the human beast. He's anything. He is anything, and he can be anything and anybody on TV. in mainstream society. He can go from being the show of jackass to being a policeman, lawyer, doctor, a judge. He can be the lowest to the highest, which means that he's omnipotent, which subconsciously is saying he's God. Whereas the African male on TV is the lowest of the low, and that's being pushed. So because we do more TV watching than reading, that's what we get, and that's what we model ourselves after. And because the sisters that are being brought up in the same European paradigm are not knowing this, they're judging us by European ideology of what a man is supposed to be financially. And because of this, you're getting less and less coming together of African males and African females in the society. So when you're asking the question, because I had a study, they don't have the same study every 2 or 4 years, why are black females not getting married? Because, and this is my answer, because a lot of the black females are judging their men or what they see as a man based upon the European structure or financial structure. And because that man does not have a certain amount of money and they are basing it off of that intrinsic value, they're looking at him as being inferior to them. And then you have the same independent female craze, which was started from the Willie Lynch letter, as well as the feminist movement, because black women, regardless of whether they want to admit it or not, are the only women, African women are the only ones in America to keep saying I'm independent. No other race of people says that but African women. Nobody does. Whether it be Asian, Latino, or white, they have no reason to say they're independent. Because if you say you're independent, that means you are what? You gained your independence from something. You broke free from some form of bondage. And we didn't put you in bondage. The human beast did. The caveman did. The Tamahu did. So who are you independent from? Are you independent from him? Because you can't be independent from him if you're using his ideology to judge us as men. So you're getting still the same separation. And because they don't realize the same war that's being put upon us, then there's going to be more problems within our homes and less homes being created, because realize we are still reproducing at a rapid rate. Even though it's down, we reproduce higher than other races of people. You know, you realize Caucasians, human beasts, they have a degenerate sperm count at a certain point. They're very, you notice most of their families are very low. You know, don't have very many kids. When you look at the African families, most of their families are very high when it comes to population. So as opposed to not only the foods that are killing us off because we refuse to change our diet, and because of mass genocide through AIDS that's killing us off, and this is, if you want to refer to ancient Egypt and the pharaohs, you have a system of an education system that starts from the eugenics to the learning disability and all the way through outcome-based education that is destroying the African male in this society, because it doesn't really affect African women, because if you notice, most African women are now getting the degrees. They're getting the degrees that we both should have been getting. That's why you see most of them are at a higher level socially than a lot of the African males in this society. They are now making the study, you can look it up. African females are making more money than African males on a majority level. You know, 3 out of 4 are making more money than African males. And so you're getting a thought pattern where if I'm making more money than you, I don't need you for anything anyway but to have a child. But now it's to a point where I don't even need you for that. I can just go to a sperm bank and go get whatever I need and create a child on my own. So I don't really need you for a relationship. So now it's becoming a form of self-hate among the African males and African females. You're getting a situation where there's a neglect of us coming together. So that is our main problem now within this genocide that's going on in our race of people. And we have to be able to see this situation going on right now. If we don't see it for what it is, then the situation will continue and it will get worse and worse and worse. And it will not be able to get any more progressive. We will not become progressive in our own group of people. And that's going to be a problem. And it's going to continue. Does anyone have any questions?
Well said, brother. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Well
yeah,
said.
this is a problem. This is a problem, and because we're not seeing it for what it is, a lot of us just don't know what's going on. A lot of us don't know the game. A lot of us don't know the wars going on between us. We have to start coming together as a people. We have to come together. My father said it on the New Covenant tape. We have to come together, and because when we start to come together, different factions can realize, look, we need to get out of these schools. We need to get out of their schools and get our own. And because once that happens, then we can finally put an end to the way we're being educated as males. Because they don't give a crap about us. We keep thinking that they have our best interest in mind. We have to have our own interest in mind. We have to start caring about our own families, and we have to educate our women on what's being done to them as well in this same system. You know, we have to get them to stop saying they're independent. Stop saying that phrase because it sounds very old. You're the only one that's still using it, and it makes no sense in the first place. We have to start becoming responsible for our own education. Okay? Once you see what's going on to you, then you're able to combat it with education. You cannot allow them to measure your brain and your brain capacity. You know, don't allow them to make you into a degenerate male, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to eliminate us. If they can't kill us, they'll just make us kill ourselves in the streets, and that's what's happening right now. So we have to see it for what it is, brothers and sisters. This is not a game. This is not a game. It's not a joke. You know, we can go into actual facts all day, and that's true indeed. We need that, but we also need to know that at the end of the day, as my father said in several books, we cannot allow them to educate us any longer, regardless of what it is. Cannot allow them to educate us, even when it comes to self-esteem, because a lot of us are now, it's a high of us going into psychiatrists, white psychiatrists, that are diagnosed as, ADHD and all these things. A lot of us, I had the same problem. They told me I couldn't stand still. They labeled me ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And they put you in structured classes where you're in there with people who are literally retarded. Literally. They can't think for themselves, all these things, and handicapped chairs. I was in those classes because of the way they diagnosed me. You understand? I had to go outside of the way they educated me and educate myself. And if I didn't do that, I don't know where I would be right now. When I was in school in the 11th grade, a teacher of mine, a black female teacher, told me I was not college material. You're not smart enough. You ask too many questions, and you can't sit still, and you have an attitude problem. So maybe when you're done, or you can look for a job right now. This is something I'll never forget, and she told me this. And if I had to listen to her, I wouldn't be who I am right now. But that same thing goes on in our community and in our schools every single day. And it consistently goes on. Because they can't say it's racial when your own people are doing it to you. You see, when it's your own people doing it to you, you can't say, well, this is a white person. No, a black person told you that, so you can't say that. So it's a problem. And you got to realize where she's coming from, because she's under the spell. She's asleep. So now she's a worker of the devil. She's a black devil who was converted into what she's doing. Mm-hmm. And we have to combat all that. But it's hard to combat something when you don't know the game and when your self-esteem has been destroyed. And we have to see ourselves as being superior. If we don't see ourselves as being superior and stop seeing ourselves as being inferior, we're going to always have this problem and we're never going to get it together. You understand? Does anyone have anything they want to say or have any questions on this?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, do you still do the affirmation?
Huh?
Like, is that the affirmation that you say before you hang up?
Yeah, still do it.
So you still do it. So it's like a different language now or something?
No, it's the same language. It's not called affirmation no more. It's called the anthem.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still the same. Yeah. But I wanted to, no one had any more questions. I'm going to close and actually start the anthem now. And next week, we're going to go into a study. As you see, as you can tell, I went a little bit into it this week, but I'm going to go into actually studying the golden era of hip-hop, and it's going to be based on that and where the waning happened, you know, where the drop happened and where hip-hop is today. Because I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about this because, you know, we need to know, you know, how we're being attacked in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, like Professor Beers, it's a psychological covert war on hip-hop.
Right. Yeah, and I advertised that book, The Psychological Covert War on Hip-Hop, you know, and the relation or the infiltration of the Illuminati, because it's real. You know, it's very real, man. We have a culture that we created, you know, as we've been being the most creative people on the planet, is now all based on money and sexism and homosexuality, you know, and extreme forms of violence and lower levels of behavior. That's our problem, man. We're being attacked in every way, shape, and form.
Indeed, we got them vibrating on that lower chakra.
Exactly.
That negative energy.
Exactly, brother. Exactly. About to start the anthem now. Abdur ku ashutat wabazuna farahun shupapa'at. Anuki dahu pa ashak shupapa'at. Wukalu habab kalun dahuni. Anuki kasamun shupapa'at. Wupapa'at kalun kasamun shurni. Nuk wahu ama papa'at. Wupapa'at kalun wahu amani. Nuk kadur najuh ama kasamun shupapa'at. Wu habub ama shahas'un nuk kadur kawun kalu dik nuk rajub dahu papa'at talama rajatni kalun baguh dahu papa'at anuki yabud bi nafusni papa'at kalun anuki papa'at kadur nuk kadur papa'at fa'ul nuk fa'ul wadukul hatu washu. Cool. Cool.